All right, welcome to another episode of NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. This episode, we are talking about the San Francisco 49ers, and I am joined by Ron E. Niner, host of That Niner Life podcast. How are you doing, sir?
Good, man. Good to be here. I'm appreciate the opportunity, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a pretty good life so far the last couple years for the 49ers. Didn't quite end how you thought it was going to end, but, there's a lot of promise going forward for the 49ers, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. There's a lot to be excited about. I think we have a really good roster. I'm excited about the draft. There is a lot. There's a lot to talk about. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we can kind of get right to that. I mean, the draft just happened, and I'm not really one that will kind of do grades on drafts and things like that. But it's so important to kind of hear from those who cover the team, who are fans of the team, to really kind of dig in and how they think the players fit on the roster and all that. And so we can kind of get into some of the first few picks. Now, they didn't pick until the second round, I believe, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
And so with their first pick in the second round, they had defensive lineman Drake Jackson, I believe, out of USC.
Yeah. Yep. They did first pick, second round, 61st pick overall. So
And what were your thoughts kind of going, into that pick? I mean, did you think they were going to go D lineman, or what were you hoping that they would pick at that point?
Well, my initial reaction was shock. I definitely did not see that coming. But just when you think they're two steps ahead of you. But how could I, be fooled and not think that they're going to pick an edge or a D lineman? That's what they do. But initially, yeah, I was like, "There's no way." And when they take them, then everything started to click. When they were at the USC Pro Day, I thought they were actually there for Drake London.
Mm.
And it probably preparing for the Deebo trade. But then when they picked Drake Jackson, I'm like, oh, okay, now that makes sense. So I was actually I was a little bit surprised, but when you watch more film on him, then you can see why they took him.
And so he's going to fit it as a day one starter, isn't he?
Yeah, well, he's going to compete absolutely. I don't know if I'm going to classify him as a day one starter just
Mm.
yet. We do have depth there, obviously, but if we do, he's going to have to beat out some pretty good guys. We have Ebicum. We just signed Turay. We brought back Hyder. He may be flipped on the other side with Bosa to give him some relief, but he's got good promise, really high ceiling.
Well, speaking of, high ceiling and competing, it's always interesting. You look at the 49ers, and they're definitely known as a running team from the outside. We kind of say, you know, from what they use Deebo Samuel as, and now they added Tyrion Davis Price. What do you know about him? And, is he going to kind of compete with, the rest of the backs there?
Yeah, I think he absolutely is going to be in the mix to I don't know if start but relieve Mitchell. The odd man out in all of this, when they drafted him, I immediately thought about Trey Sermon and
Mm.
how it probably indicates that they're not too happy with where they're at with him right now. So he was the first guy that came to mind when they drafted Ty. A lot of the guys that I know and a lot of the fans that I talk to who are LSU fans have told me, dude, this guy's probably better than Fournette. Then you look at his tape, and he's really good at that read option. So if you need someone who bullies in between the tackles with Trey Lance there, this is the dude right here. I know a lot of fans were taken back with how early we grabbed him, but if he's a guy you like, it doesn't matter at the end if the results are there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's interesting you say good on with the read option, because I remember talking to another 49ers podcaster, Jane, and he talked about how he thought that Trey Sermon would have an uptick this year because of, just, what he's done kind of with that, with Trey Lance. And now it's interesting that they have Tyrion Davis Price. Maybe he's kind of going to be that back to be the one to watch this year.
Yeah. So I'm not counting Trey Sermon out just yet. I think if there's an odd man out, it's going to be Hasty.
Mm.
But I think fans were taken back with how early we grabbed Ty. We're more accustomed to grabbing a running back later, and kind of been spoiled with the fact that we can grab someone in the sixth round and get the results that we did with Mitchell. But like I said, if you talk to LSU fans, you can kind of understand why we got him in the third round. They're saying he may be better than Fournette. We don't know yet though, but it's good promise.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at promise, one of the spots that you need promise, or at least some good news coming out of, is the wide receiver position. With everything kept kind of happening with Deebo. What Where does Danny Gray, that pickup? Where does he project? I mean, I saw that he had a lot of all good, I was like over 800 all-purpose yards. In it, could he be kind of a replacement for Deebo if you do end up kind of moving him, or?
Yeah, I think so. He was another bit of a shocker when they took him. I did not think they were going to grab a receiver that early, but when you look at his tape and you look at his route tree, it's identical to Deebo Samuel's. Yards after the catch, jet sweep routes, screen routes. He's like a baby. Deebo just absolutely a blazer. The downside of his game is the blocking. We all know Kyle Shanahan likes blockers, and I mean you can work on that. Look at BA, but yeah, when they took him, I was a little bit shocked. But as I looked at his tape, I'm like, and then you look at a Senior Bowl tape, he was just absolutely impressive. So I'm still hoping that, and I know we're going to get a little bit into it later, but that, we're going to work something out with Deebo. But if we don't, Danny Gray is definitely there for us. So
You always got to have those backup plans, with the those offensive skill positions. You never know with injuries, or you just never know.
yeah, I mean, that's the good thing about the roster. I think Kyle feels really confident with his roster. And when you feel that confident with the guys that you have on your roster, it opens up a lot of options in the draft. And you saw that. Maybe they went best player available and who they wanted, and then they went for needs. But that's one thing I took back from this draft is that Kyle keeps telling us he's absolutely comfortable with who he has. And then he went and got his guys. So definitely exciting, man.
Yeah, and when you look at, I mean, there's a couple of offensive linemen here: Spencer Burford, out of UTSA,
Mhm.
Nick Zakelj, out of Fordham, and some small school guys. Uh, Not as much of a surprise as opposed to kind of what the Patriots did in the first round with their small school linemen, but they should at least compete for roster spots, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So Spencer Burford was probably my favorite pick. If you look at his tape, he's just absolutely physical. He wins a lot. I think he only gave up 2 sacks and about 420 rush attempts, which is phenomenal. And then you have a mentor like Trent Williams there. It gives you a lot of high expectations for this kid. The other thing that I noticed as well, and Zakel, he's an all academic team. He's
Mm,
accustomed to playing multiple positions. A lot of fans don't know about Zakel is that he actually played D line in high school, and he was
mhm.
recruited to play offensive line. And he can play multiple positions, but he's really smart. So they're getting a lot of big athletes, man. And, as the NFL evolves, it just seems like the 49ers are 2 steps ahead of the curve every single time with these big athletes that they're bringing in playing multiple positions.
Tell you what, yeah, along that offensive line, you definitely need players that can play multiple positions, especially if they want to carve out roster spots for themselves and eventually, kind of take on that starting role. And I mean, does like Spencer Burford, where does he project? Like I mean, is he going to be a tackle, guard, or where do you think he fits right now?
I think he fits as a swing tackle.
Mm,
That's where I can see him playing on both sides of that, the quarterback. So that's where I would have him. Of course, he's probably not going to beat out, Trent. But if there's any concerns with McGlinchey, you can
mhm.
plug him over there. Jalen Moore is more of a guard to me than he is a tackle. So that's probably the upside with Burford is to switch him on over to McGlinchey because I still don't know about McGlinchey's injury and where he's at with it. I'm hopeful, but there's always a contingency plan, and I absolutely love that pick.
What about the other defensive picks? The cornerback Samuel Womack and defensive lineman Kalia Davis out of Central Florida.
Kalia Davis is probably my second. So I had three really good. three of the guys were ones that I absolutely fell in love with as I watched their tape, and Kalia Davis was another one. He had 5 starts at UCF, but he's played on multiple positions. He played linebacker. He actually went into UCF as a linebacker, and his freshman year, his coach approached him to play D line. So he's played edge, he's played rush. Now he's playing inside. But if you look at him, he's a clone of DJ Jones.
Mm.
I was sad to see DJ Jones leave, but I absolutely understand that we probably couldn't afford him. But now that I see Kalia Davis get drafted, I know exactly why. Um, he's fast off the ball. He's strong. He's got a good punch, and you expect a lot of disruption from him, especially when you pair him up with Chris Kasurik. You're going to see a lot of tackles for loss from this kid. Absolute athlete, man. I love that guy. He's just already grown on me.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you look at some of the defensive players. I mean, the 49ers are really known for their defense. They're known for, you know, being able to draft and develop guys, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing about Kyle. I think that he's absolutely confident in his coaching staff. And when you really step back as a fan, your initial reaction as a fan is, well, why would you take him? He didn't play that position. But it's almost like Kyle wants his linemen to be interchangeable and play multiple positions, which to me is absolutely brilliant if you think about it. It's a if you can play a guy, the more positions that you play, the more valuable you are. But yeah, I think Kyle's 100% confident in how his coaching staff can bring these guys in, develop them, and then probably try to turn them into all pros. And you've seen that with folks like Deebo Samuel and all the other guys that they pick later in rounds.
Yeah, and kind of finishing out the draft as well. You have Tariq Castro Fields out of Penn State. Obviously played at a big school. You never know if, how well they're going to fit in the system, but at least that's a good value pick there. Do you know much about him now?
I do. So he actually ran a faster 40 than Sauce Gardner in the top 10 corners that they took.
Really?
Yeah, so he's absolutely fast. I'll start with the big negative on him is his tackling.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's where you see a lot of gaps is his ability to tackle. So because of his age, he looks like he's almost near the ceiling. So I don't know that that's going to change much. But if you look at how he mirrors receivers' routes, he's really good at it. He's good in coverage schemes like cover two. He knows his cap coverages, and he actually plays really well without being too handsy and drawing penalties. He played on the outside. He's got really long arms, but if he's gonna want to, if he's gonna have a chance in the league, his tackling absolutely has to improve.
Well, late in the draft, that's a pretty good flyer. I mean, if it pans out, great. If it doesn't, it's a late
Mm-hmm.
round pick anyway. And
Mm-hmm.
you look at kind of the other late round last pick, Brock Purdy out of Iowa State, Mister Irrelevant. I'm very familiar with him. I am an Iowa Hawkeye fan, so I've seen Purdy quite a bit, and it sounded like they really liked him.
Yeah. So Perry's from Arizona. I live in Arizona. Excuse me. I got to see Purdy play at Perry High School here in Queen Creek.
Oh,
So
you did? Okay, yeah.
I am very familiar with Brock Purdy. I actually thought he was going to be recruited by the Sun Devils. He did not, but I am a huge fan of Brock Purdy. I did watch him out in Iowa, and I'm absolutely rooting for him. I am. I love the kid. I think he's got what it takes, and hopefully we can work something out with him.
Yeah, he's got a good fire in him, and that's not a bad second or third string quarterback if he kind of works into it. Obviously Trey Lance is the guy that you want to
Hmm.
develop, and looking at Trey Lance. I mean, what are your expectations then for Trey Lance in 2022? And I mean, is he are they gonna dial back the offense for him? Are they going to kind of give him the whole keys, or what are you kind of expecting this year from him in the offense?
Well, I think just the way it plays out with the way Kyle calls his plays, it's going to be to protect him anyway because we're a run first team. So that's absolutely going to benefit him. But having him redshirt a year, I still think that Kyle's going to expect him to step back and sling it. I project him at about 4,000 yards passing. That may be a little high, but I absolutely do think he has the ability to excel. Um, but yeah, I mean, as far as calling audibles at the line, that's where I'm interested to see how Kyle trusts him for those
Mhm.
any of those pre-snap reads and any of those audibles because you don't see Jimmy do that a lot. That's where I want to see how those two function coming into the season. But yeah, I do have him at about 4,000 rush passing yards, maybe a 600 to 700 rushing yards, about 25 passing touchdowns, something like that. So, yep.
Well, I mean, when you look at it, I mean, and it's hard to kind of look back, but if Trey Lance was the starter for that playoff game versus the Rams, I mean, would they have done better or the same or worse? Or I mean,
I think they would have done the same. I
yeah,
think that I'm a big believer that we probably should have went with Trey since the get go, and we probably would have got the same results. I'm not knocking on Jimmy, but I truly believe that all that Trey Lance needs is reps and playing time. And if we would have gave him a full season now, we would have already been ahead of it. But yeah, I think the result would probably it would have been the same. We probably had a better chance because he can run. So yeah, I absolutely think that he was ready to play. You know,
yeah. Tell you what, as a Bears fan living in Wisconsin, as I told you earlier, um, I was definitely rooting for the 49ers in that game, and I just, kept seeing Jimmy try to give it to the Packers, and I mean, it just he's got a ceiling. I mean, he's a capable quarterback in the NFL. He's maybe not he's definitely not a Super Bowl winning quarterback yet, but when you look at him, I mean, where do you think is he ends up? I mean, there aren't a lot of places left for him, right?
there really isn't. When the season broke, I had him in two places, and I'm going to stick with these two places. I had him going to the NFC South somewhere. But my first pick was New Orleans. I think that's out the window. But I'm still sticking with Carolina. It's still a possibility. I know they just drafted a quarterback. But if I think their coach over there, he's on the burner and he needs a franchise saving QB to come in and save the day. Jimmy's a good guy to go over there. They got a good defense. They got McCaffrey over there. They have good wideouts. I still don't rule out Carolina as a possible destination for Jimmy, but I can't think of anywhere else to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, Seattle would have been another one, but like I don't know if they want him. I know uh, Baker, obviously Baker Mayfield's out there as well, but you know all of the let's see, even Steve Smith Jr. When asked whether Baker would go to the Panthers, he said no, and so I think so did Anderson, one of the wide receivers from the Panthers. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, as far as Baker going to Carolina, maybe that's not going to happen. But yeah, Jimmy G would make sense there, at least to be have a veteran to kind of steady the offense and at least get them moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy's probably going to end up in the same situation that he's in now. I
Hmm.
think that's really how the league sees Jimmy is as a bridge mentor. I do applaud him for the way he's handled himself when after they drafted Trey Lance. He could have easily acted like Baker Mayfield. I
Hmm.
don't think that's Jimmy, but if you're gonna send him somewhere, it's probably going to be to the same exact situation. The question is whether Jimmy's wanting to restructure or not. But I think Carolina's still in play. You know what I mean? I don't see anywhere else really, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, you hope him the best, and but yeah, he's not going to be the guy that's going to get you to the Super Bowl. I mean, he's definitely competent, but he's um, for now he's a good quarterback.
Yeah, he's just. I mean, we drafted Trey for a reason, you
Hmm.
know.
Hmm.
And the thing about Jimmy, it's the mistakes that are made at the
Hmm.
most critical times. And a lot of the mistakes are mistakes you expect from a 1 to 2 year quarterback. And Jimmy's already been in the system, 5, 6 years. The question really comes down to: are you getting your money's worth when you have Jimmy Garoppolo? Obviously not. But yeah, I think he's been pedestrian in the playoffs, and they've had to bail him out a lot. So I wish him the best. I just don't think there's a future here for him anymore.
Absolutely. And speaking of player that did kind of bail him out a lot and the 49ers out, Deebo Samuel. I mean, what do you make of this kind of whole situation? It's an interesting time now with players and their social media accounts and how they kind of, choose to address things. What are your kind of thoughts on that, and where will he end up?
Well, I still think they're going to work something out. I think Kyle comes in and saves the day, smooth things over with Debo. When this whole thing broke out and Debo request, there was news and there was rumors and whatever you want to call it. Debo was asking to be dealt and traded. Your initial response is one. I mean, it's a kick in the gut. You're like, what? But then immediately as a fan, you start wanting to play the blame game. Like, who's responsible for this? My initial thought was, it has to be the agent.
Mm,
And then you ask yourself, is this the new norm when it comes to negotiations and free agency? For players to go out and scrub their social media and all these antics. And, when it comes to certain agents, the answer is yes.
mhm.
I think, in my opinion, Debo's getting bad advice. But at the same time, if you really step back, you got to ask yourself, if they would have just offered Debo right out of the gates, because John Lynch is going to tell you the Jimmy situation is not holding anything back.
Mm.
So you almost have to ask yourself, well, then why not offer Debo right into free agency and work something out? Because if you look at the Christian Kirk contract, that's really what set everything off. If you really
Mhm.
think about it, if you're Deebo Samuel, you're a human, man. You're a young man. You can't help but really think like, this guy's getting paid that much money. If Christian Kirk gets paid 3 or 4, rows down the line, you pay Tariq. Tariq gets traded. Adams gets paid. Um, Diggs gets paid, and then Kirk gets paid. I don't even know that we're really talking about the deal. But because he signed first, that's what really blew everything up. So I ask myself, why do we wait so long to open up business when it comes to our all pros? You look at Warner, you look at Kittle, they signed into July, August. And sometimes you almost have to wonder, if we were to just offer Debo 22, 23 million right out of the gate, would he have taken it?
Well, and the Niners aren't known for kind of doing business like that, are they?
They're not. So as a
Yeah.
fan, you have to wonder, is that something that needs to change going forward? Because I mean, it doesn't look like that's actually beneficial. You got to treat different players. I mean, certain players different. Like, you probably can get away with that with Kittle. Even with Kittle, his agent was like, he called it the St. Valentine Day Massacre when they sent out that low ball offer. But there's certain agents who are going to tell their players, be quiet, don't say anything, let me do the deal, let me do the talking, stay out of the media, don't do any interviews, just be quiet. But then you look at Tony Dandy, and he has all these receivers like Deebo Samuel, AJ Brown,
Mm.
Terry McClellan out in Washington, and now I believe Jalen Rager. I think he represents Rager. I may be wrong there, but all these guys have the same strategy. Immediately go out and scrub your social media. And to me, it's like, what do you really gain out of that besides being talked about? And then besides negativity from the fan base. So one, I'm like, I point at the agent and I'm saying, well, you know what? I don't think that's going to work, especially with this organization. You should know better and tell your player, look, these guys don't really work things out until July or August. So we're going to have to stay put. But
Although, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I say, although, when you look at Deebo and you look at all the social media, you know, in how players and people can make so much from social media, when you look at any media, to some players, any media is good. Any attention is good attention. And when you look at Deebo Samuel, I mean, teams are going into this draft, looking for the next Deebo Samuel, right? And so when you look at what he did, it's almost like you look at it, step back, and he's almost trying to capitalize or regain his name back, and so when you look at it from a player's perspective, you can't fault him for trying to get his money. Um, and it's so interesting because it used to be, you look at fans and fans wouldn't buy jerseys or whatever if they were mad at a player, but it's not like that anymore. I mean, if they like a player, they're gonna support him regardless. And it is a different time. And when you look at some of these organizations like the Niners that have always done things a certain way, eventually they're gonna have to change if they want to stay relevant, I think.
Yeah, I agree. That's why, as a fan, you got to wonder. I mean, is this good for business? To just paint things, paint everything with a broad stroke. Like, did they? I don't know. Did they misread Deebo? I certainly did. I didn't see this coming from Deebo Samuel, but now we're here, and then you look back at things, and you got to wonder: do things need to change? In my opinion, I absolutely do think they do.
And the one thing I hope doesn't change, if he does go somewhere, I just hope he doesn't go to the Packers.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I really don't see him getting dealt right now. Debo doesn't really have a lot of leverage, to be honest with you. I'm gonna try and buy what John Lynch is telling us, and they're gonna work something out. It's just it got messy really fast, and I think there's just a better way. So hopefully next offseason things change. I really do hope that they start doing things a little bit different.
Yeah, because he's not going to sit out the season, right?
No, I don't think so. I think they're going to absolutely pay him, especially when you see them picking up Nick Bosa's fifth-year option. I think it's absolutely wise for them to sign him this year versus next year, because next year the salary cap goes up, and the more
Mhm.
money you have, the more money players are going to want. So I think we're all going to look back at this deal in the future and think paying Deebo Samuel this year was probably not a bad idea.
Very smart.
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of kind of smart, the way the 49ers have drafted and found running backs and used them, it's just been they've had injury after injury, and then someone steps in and just blows it out of the water. Elijah Mitchell kind of came out of nowhere, and I'm not sure if you in camp saw this happening. Uh, do you see him being a workhorse back, or will it be more running back by committee with who they picked up in the draft and Trey Sermon? And what do you see that a running back situation for the 49ers being like?
I still think it's running back by committee. I think
Mm-hmm.
last year was unfortunate because we lost Mostert due to injury. We also lost Wilson to a high ankle sprain. And that's why Kyle is so big on having a lot of running backs, and he carries a lot through the season. I still think Mitchell's the starter, but I don't want to be in a situation where we were last year when he was just absolutely running on fumes in the playoffs. So that's why Ty getting picked up from LSU makes a lot of sense. One, he's great at the short yardage. We need a bully in the red zone. I don't think Mitchell's that guy.
Mm.
Um, and the thing about Sermon is I still have a lot of questions because when we went into training camp last year, there was a lot of rave about what he was doing. He looked like a man amongst boys. and then something just happened. I don't know if Kyle's gotten in the habit of redshirting guys, which I absolutely love. Draft and stash. That's the old school way of doing things. That's how he did them in the 90s. It absolutely worked. So hopefully this is his year to shine. But to answer your question, I think it's still going to be by committee. I see Mitchell still as the starter, but I think Ty is going to be there at 2 or 3 in that lineup. Yep.
It'll be interesting to see. And when you look at some of those, uh, running backs that they've had in the past, I mean, it's amazing just to see, Mostert, he was just amazing, and then got injured, multiple times, but he looked amazing. They have Elijah Mitchell. Is this more kind of scheme, or is it more talent when it comes to 49ers running backs?
It's more about the scheme. You know what I mean? I think it is a combination, but he when you look at what Kyle does, he's gonna put in, like if you look at Coleman, you look at Wilson, uh these guys are in between the tackles runners. That's where you plug them in. But with Kyle, it's absolutely about scheme. That's just the way he does things.
Well, going back to the Deebo stuff, Steve-O had a comment here. He said, "Shouldn't Deebo know it's better to get paid next year?"
Yeah, that's a great point, but he doesn't have any leverage. Yeah, like I said, if you're a player, you're probably going to want to push into next year. So, but right now, he doesn't have any leverage to sit out until next year because one, if he does, he's just going to lose a year anyway, and he still has to play it. If you're the organization, you absolutely got to throw that money at him now. So he doesn't want that. You know what I mean? And it doesn't get messier. Great question, though.
And when you look at the season, last year, it didn't end how you thought it, would. But obviously, there were some twists and turns of the season. Did you expect them to kind of get to the Super Bowl before they started the season last year? Or, I mean, what were your expectations at the beginning of the season last year?
Yeah, so I mean, going into the season, I expected them to at least get through the wild card. One thing about the 49ers and being a big 49er fan is that when we go to the playoffs, we kind of go all the way. We definitely go deep into it. So if we don't, we don't. But when we get into the dance, you expect us to make noise. So going into the season, I absolutely thought we were going to make a playoff run when we were 3-5, and if it wasn't for that screen by Deebo against your Bears, I don't know that we're having a, we're
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, I had my doubts, I really did, and then after that, it just became kind of magical. I almost started to think like, could this possibly be the year where we win it all? But obviously that didn't happen. So yeah, I had high expectations going into the season.
And then when you went into the playoffs. They were just such a dangerous team. Cowboys knew it, and they kind of have that edge, and to them on some of these teams. And when you look at then, they didn't quite, make it the Super Bowl. They didn't make the Super Bowl last year. And when you look at 2022, I mean, what are your expectations now? I mean, is it a little bit tempered because you have a first year quarterback now, or what are your expectations going into the season?
I still have high expectations. Like I said earlier, I still see Trey Lance as more than capable. In my opinion, he can't be any worse than Jimmy. And you see what we
Mhm.
did. I mean, you obviously see what we did with Jimmy. The thing that benefits this year a lot is the mass exodus that you saw in free agency and everybody jumping over to the AFC. Of course, we have the AFC West on our schedule. We have a brutal schedule, but I still have us at least top 5 in our conference. So I don't think anything should fall off. If anything, I think our production in the offense should improve. We were top 10 in defense. We were right there when it came to the offense. So I'll see. I think we're going to see a lot more passing attempts. So yeah, I mean, my expectations are sky high at this point, especially after the
When
draft.
Right, absolutely. But when you look at the offense, do you think they're going to miss? Obviously, Mike McDaniel. on that, offense at all? Or
Yeah, I do think so. There's two things that I think we're going to miss. That player connection.
Mhm.
When Mike McDaniel left, I've always had questions about whether Kyle had that connection with the players or not. But when it comes to the run design, that was all McDaniel. So that's one thing I'm definitely looking out for. They brought in Lynn, but as a running backs coach, and probably to get him into a head coaching position, which we would absolutely love to have that pick for. But when it comes to run design, in my opinion, I felt like McDaniel was the mastermind behind it. So that's another thing to look out for next year is how do we look when it comes to the run game?
well, and when you look at the rest of the NFC as well, I mean, what teams scare you the most going into this season?
I'd still have to say the Packers are up there, even though we have their number. I don't know that the Rams are going to fall as much as people think. Um, the Bucks with Brady coming back, you always have to count them in.
Hmm.
But those are the three teams right now. And if you look at what the Saints are doing, they may be in the mix as well. But right now, I still think it's going to be the Packers and the Rams that are going to give us a run for our money.
Steve has a great comment here. He said McDaniel didn't call the plays. Who thought he would be an F head coach? Nobody.
He did not call the plays. He was in charge of the run game design. Um, yeah, look, I didn't really see McDaniels as a head coach. I don't know. I love the guy, but he just doesn't have. That was a shocker to me, to be honest with you. Salah was a shocker as well,
Mm.
but he kind of makes a good point. Does McDaniels really carry the presence of a head coach, or does he look like a quality control analytics guy? You know what I mean? I don't want to judge the guy, but I'm interested to see how he does. That's going to be definitely interesting because he's right. He's never called plays before.
Tell you what, though, I mean, he connects with his players. I mean, that's huge.
Hmm.
Players seem to love him. He's different. He's just a different. He's a smart guy. So it'll be interesting, especially with everything they have in Miami. It's gonna be a wild ride for the Dolphins, I think. But I like that. I like when teams do different things. Obviously, 49ers seem to kind of march by their own, be their own drum. They kind of do
Hmm.
that, and that's worked well for them. I mean, you have some of these teams that just do the same thing over and over again. The Cowboys, right? Who
Right.
they have as coach, right? An
Hmm.
old
No question.
retread, and so yeah, I just don't, look. You look at some of these teams that just want to do the same thing over and over again, and it's not working.
It's not. Yeah. So the thing about McDaniel is, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like I said, he has that player connection. The players love him. But as a player, I played football my whole life, and I had a really intense high school coach.
Hmm.
Um, I'm trying to imagine McDaniel's yelling at me. I'm trying to imagine his motivational speeches at halftime. We're getting our butts kicked. So those are the type of things that you are interested to see with McDaniel's is are you motivated by his speeches or are you gonna laugh? I think he's just a funny dude, but I'm rooting for the guy. I really want to see him stand in front of his team, address his team, and do all that head coaching stuff, like motivate the guys. And that's where I want to see him excel, because I don't see that yet.
Well, you look at we talked about Trey Lance excelling in this offense, or obviously needing to. It's really important. The other piece of it, the wide receivers, and obviously, it's a question mark whether Deebo Samuel will be there. We think probably he will be. What are your expectations for Brandon Ayuk and the rest of the wide receivers in 2022?
So IU, like I said, so he's a Sun Devil. Again, I've gotten to see IU play multiple times in person before he got drafted. I absolutely knew he's a stud. His talent has not been. We have not capitalized on his talent. A lot of fans think that we don't have a deep threat. I disagree. Ayuk is absolutely a deep threat. With Trey Lance coming in and how they're building that relationship in the offseason, that rapport, you're going to see him absolutely go and have a better year. Um, I think maybe 1,400 receiving yards. But I think you're finally going to see Brandon Ayuk at the level that I saw him at ASU. It's also going to depend on whether we keep Deebo. Like I said, I think we are, because having Deebo on the other side is absolutely going to benefit Ayuk. Now, if let's just say we take Deebo out of the equation, you double team Ayuk, you're going to see. I mean, that's really hard, But with Deebo on the other side, and then insert Danny Gray, and he turned out to be the guy we all expect him to be. This is the guy that's going to benefit the most, is Brandon.
And
Yep.
he was doing well toward the end of last year too, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, and it's unfortunate, like I said, because Jimmy doesn't throw the deep ball well. We haven't been able to capitalize on Brandon Ayuk's talent. He had a quarterback in college who can throw the deep ball, and if you look at his college tape, he's absolutely explosive. So yeah, I'm really excited to finally say, yeah, this guy is a guy I've always watched, even coming out of college.
Steve says Ayuk, Deebo, and Kittle 1,000 guys. Tell you what, I mean, that would be a heck of an offense. You get, Kittle. We haven't even really talked about Kittle. I mean, do you look at Kittle, differently with Trey Lance as opposed to with Jimmy G, or is it going to be similar production, or where are you hoping Kittle will be?
Yeah, I think Kittle's going to benefit as well. Kittle was asked to block a lot last year. He had some really big games, and then there were some games where he was just basically our right tackle. So you're going to see probably an increase in targets for Kittle as well. The stat that stood out to me last year was we were about top 12 in yards after the catch, offensive touchdowns, but we were like dead last in passing attempts.
Mm.
So a lot of that came from yards after the catch. That's the stat to look for next year, is the passing attempts and how evenly it's going to be across the board. So with my Kittle expectations are, yeah, there was a lot of rumbles about Kittle not being bought into Trey Lance and stuff like that. I never bought it. Kittle's an ultimate pro. And then if you really listen to his interviews, I think Kittle's going to benefit as well.
And Steve says we're first in the red zone.
Yes. Yes, we were first in the red zone. But like if you look at the stats, Steve, take the time to go out and look at where we were with passing touchdowns and versus passing attempts. The number is staggering. I believe we were like 29th in passing attempts, and we were in like the top 12 when it came to touchdowns and offensive yards. So that just tells you it's a quick 5-8 yard, maybe 3 yard pass, and then the ball carrier just absolutely explodes.
Just kind of thinking about it, did the philosophy change at all throughout the year? I mean, that kind of pushed Deebo to more of that running back kind of in the red zone because they weren't getting as much, or was it from the get go that he was kind of more that gadget play that was doing more of the running?
No, I think that was a product of Kyle's innovation. When we were 3-5, I think Kyle absolutely did what he had to do. One, the injury to Mostert, and then Jimmy's limitations. Deebo was a product of that, and insert Deebo. That's really what it came down to. That's why I don't think he's going to be utilized that same way. I think he was just used that way because we had to, and it worked.
I tell you what, as a Bears fan, I definitely would have loved last year to have a coaching staff that would learn from what they were, what was going on and adapt. And they just didn't do it. Obviously, that's why we have the Bears have a new head coach, leadership and everything. When you look at Shanahan, obviously he's been there. There've been some ups and downs, I'm sure, especially with the whole doghouse stuff. Do you see him being there just for a long time, or will he eventually wear out his welcome in San Francisco?
So yeah, like to be honest with you, I haven't been a really big Shanahan fan, but I do see a lot of growth. The one knock that I've had on Shanahan, well, actually, it's been two knocks since he's come on and since he's been a coordinator. I think he's arrogant, and I think he's really stubborn. And those are two traits that they're really hard pills to swallow for me. But I think he's starting to show growth, and that's what I'm looking for this season. Is has he learned his lesson? Is he reaching out, to like Lynn and other guys that are going to help him get over that hump? If you look at the Rams game, it was a lot of stubborn play calling by Kyle. The Rams knew what was coming, and he just kept calling it. So hopefully, with growth comes longevity. He gets to stay longer. But if we continue to see the same Kyle, the same stubborn Kyle that we seen with the Falcons that we saw early on, yeah, I don't see, But the question is who would we replace him with? But yeah, I'm hoping that I do see growth. I think I'm starting to see some change from Kyle. The Ayuk situation was a bad situation. Brandon wasn't really asked to block in college, and you should have known that scouting him.
Mm-hmm.
And McDaniels came in and actually had to save the day on that one. So those are the type of things that make you wonder whether Kyle's actually as popular as people think in the locker room.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting now without McDaniel, without that dynamic there. And it looks like, Steve also here, the slow start was the new coaches adapting and not knowing what you had. And the smart coaching staffs do that, and they look at the personnel that they have and really work with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So as far as like in-game adjustments go, like I said, I mean, Kyle's pretty good at it. I think to give him the benefit of the doubt, he's been limited, but that's his own doing. His inability to pick a quarterback has hurt him. He's had a lot of misses on quarterbacks. Hopefully Trey Lance is the answer. But yeah, what I'm looking for from Kyle this year is growth. Hopefully he's learned, and we see change when it comes to arrogance and stubbornness. You know what I mean? And admitting fault.
Absolutely. And
Mm-hmm.
and so a lot of promise going into the 49ers season. I appreciate you coming in and talking with me. And where can everyone find you again?
Yeah, so I am live on Twitter. You can catch me on Twitter at Ron E Niner. I'm also live on YouTube. I do shows also on Saturdays and Sundays with the UK faithful. They were big at the draft. I'm not sure if you
Mhm.
caught them. And I do a show with the Red and Gold 24/7. My fellows, Flying Ryan, Money Mavin, them guys on Fridays and Mondays. But my podcast airs 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock at times. It does vary depending on the night, but mainly Tuesdays and Wednesdays, Arizona time, and it's that Niner life.
Looking forward to hearing more about obviously as we get into the season, off season, and season. It's going to be another great season. Got to love the NFL and have to love following our favorite teams as well. So I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely, I appreciate you having me. Thanks for your time, man.
Once again, this NFL Outdated Cover 2 series on the 49ers. Thanks again, Ronnie.